This is Helga Gilbert, and this lecture is called Introduction to Groups. This presentation is going to give an overview of group counseling, discuss some of the terminology you'll come across in your readings, and also discuss what makes group counseling attractive or useful as a tool in the helping fields. I've added a bit of verse on this first slide. It says, "Oh, would some power the gift to give us, to see ourselves as others see us." I like this because it simply states a powerful truth. Our reality, our worldview, can become quite small and closed-minded. We humans are quite good at creating a skewed view of reality. But when a person opens him or herself up to be part of a group, they're inviting in different perspectives and they're increasing insight about themselves and their situation in the world. Of therapeutic groups, Corey, an author that we're going to turn to a lot in this course, writes that their purpose is to increase people's knowledge of themselves and others, help them clarify the changes they most want to make in their lives, and bring them some of the tools necessary to make these changes. By interacting with others in a trusting and accepting environment, participants are given the opportunity to experiment with novel behavior and to receive honest feedback from others concerning the effects of their behavior. As a result, individuals learn how they appear to others. Why do groups work? Well, people can learn how to relate to others within the group, and in so doing, improve their social skills, and that certainly applies to their life outside the group. The group creates a support where it's very safe to try out new behaviors before you have to try it in the outside world. You get a lot of practice because you're actually doing it with other people. The members may get to interact with types of individuals they don't normally talk to, different ethnicities, ages, cultural backgrounds, socioeconomic status. Another reason groups work or they're therapeutic or successful is because of factors that arise in them, like caring, hope, encouragement, and empathy from your other group members and from the group leader. And when you have factors like these, they really help foster personal growth. Members also become aware of how they affect others, how the way they behave, the way they speak, and their attitude is probably directly contributing to their relationship issues and problems with their family and friends. Often, many of individuals' current problems are linked with past personal relationships. By improving social skills and interpersonal styles, individuals can interact in their world in a more positive and self-assured way. Now, what are some of the misconceptions people have about groups and group work? This is from Corey in his book in 1997. Well, actually, it's Corey and Corey, husband and wife, from page 127. A misconception is that groups are for everyone. Well, people who are too hostile or fragile or suspicious can probably not benefit from group experience. The group leader has a responsibility to the individual and the group in who to include and who to exclude based on the welfare of everyone involved. Another misconception is that working out the problem with the group will mean it's automatically solved at home. Participants have to expect obstacles in their outside lives to working at changing themselves as they've done as part of the group. In the group, Corey says, they experience support for trying out new behaviors and attitudes, but at home, he says they may experience resistance, ridicule, antagonistic behavior towards them. Participants may experience depression after this, and not that they're not able to bring about what they hoped for and what they really thought was going to happen. And again, the leader needs to prepare people ahead of time for these realities. Another misconception is that the goal of group involvement is that everyone feels good about each other at the end of the group. Well, that is not the outcome you're necessarily going for, although it's a nice one. The goal of a group is personal growth or learning or goal setting, achieving something. The group experience isn't an end in itself. While learning to be emotionally close to others and trust others is a positive achievement, the purpose of the group was not to create a loving bond between members. Another misconception, groups are places where people are going to get attacked and their defenses torn down, stripped away. But, okay, then Corey says in reality, group leaders are going to respect members' defenses. They're not going to ask them to divulge more about their lives than they feel ready and willing to do. The group leader will promote sharing in an environment where everyone feels safe to do so. A group where people fear that they're going to be attacked and radically psychologically changed at the end of it is a group where people are going to leave and not return. They're not going to participate. So there are 4 main and broad categories of groups. These types or categories are found in any textbook that you're going to pick up because they are the ones described in the guidelines and principles of the Association for Specialists in Group Work. I'm going to read from page 9 of the Corey book. He states, a person who would lead a task or work group would assist groups like task forces, committees, planning groups, community organizations, discussion groups, study circles, learning groups to correct or develop their functioning. The purpose is to improve group dynamics and help accomplish some identified work goals. The next type of group is guidance or psychoeducational. Again, I'll read from Corey. The group leader would, quote, strive to educate group members who are relatively well-functioning individuals but who may have an information deficit in certain areas. The group would be used to educate group participants who are at risk but are presently unaffected by a potential threat like getting AIDS, or a developmental life event like a transition point in their lives, or how to cope with an immediate life crisis such as the suicide of a loved one. And the goal of the guidance and psychoeducational group would be to prevent further or the beginning of or further psychological disturbances, and to be educational. The next type of group is a counseling or interpersonal problem-solving group. Participants in this group would seek to resolve the usual yet often difficult problems of living through interpersonal support and problem-solving. It helps participants develop their existing interpersonal problem-solving competencies so they can better handle future problems. And then finally, psychotherapy groups. In psychotherapy groups, the leader helps members remediate in-depth psychological problems. The scope of practice is focused on individuals with acute or chronic mental or emotional disorders that evidenced in marked distress, impairment in functioning, or both. On this slide, you can view group counseling as taking care of 3 generally big, broad populations of problems. That would be mental health problems, physical health problems, and personal growth. So did they work? Let's look at the research. The Capuzzi text has good documentation of research studies that have taken place that do show that there is good efficacy for areas like in the mental health areas, depression, eating disorders, adjustment following divorce, coping with spouse abuse, and juvenile delinquency. So these are studies that are in your book, and you can actually go and read these journal articles. How about physical health problems? Does it help in these areas? Again, yes. It seems to be just a few examples that are in your book. Adults with chronic disease, so it would be very helpful for groups coping with things like diabetes, asthma, heart failure. Has good efficacy for geriatric groups. They touch on issues like isolation, loss, social confusion, and then insomnia. Groups are helpful because they can confront behavioral issues, learn problem-solving skills, and then also manage anxiety. All these things around the one big topic of insomnia. So these are just a few areas to show the efficacy in the physical health problems. And there are many more journal articles you could find about these things. And then in the personal growth area, career development, exploring issues like self-efficacy, career decision-making, values assessment. Shows good efficacy. Really, it works. It helps people. There are success rates. Also, parent education is good for group work. Bereavement and suicide issues. And interpersonal relations. Our field can boast group counseling techniques for career development purposes for the last 100 years. We've been working in groups. I'd like to look at some very common terms that will come up as you begin your reading in this area. And I'm taking a lot of this very direct quote from Jacobs, who wrote Group Counseling. It's a 1994 book. So the three terms I'd like to look at are group dynamics, therapeutic forces, and group process. Group dynamics, Jacobs writes, these forces can be obvious or hidden and include how members feel about themselves, how they talk to each other, how they feel about each other and about the leader, and how the leader reacts to the members. So I think of this as dynamics as sort of currents that are running through the group. Jacobs goes on to say, some of these currents are a lack of trust, a lack of commitment, power plays, conflicts between members, strong alliances between members, and attention-seeking behaviors. Dynamics that a leader has to look for and act on could be having, for instance, one or two members dominating the group, or perhaps a group member will only talk to the leader and one or two others instead of addressing comments to everyone. An example of another poor pattern might be when a leader does all the responding. Instead of letting the group members have the chance to interact with each other, the leader keeps jumping in there and responding to someone's comments. Bad dynamics would be when everybody's ganging up on one of the members, when there's just way too much arguing, when people want to give advice instead of just listen and become cohesive. There are also obviously good dynamics that could develop, like altruism, universality, cohesion. When group dynamics are positive, they make it possible for the group to be successful and therapeutic. Positive dynamics are when members like one another and they're comfortable with one another. They feel good about being part of the group, and therefore they share, divulge information about themselves. They're insightful. They set goals, and they support other members. So let's look at therapeutic forces, kind of flow from having good group dynamics. Group dynamics are positive and necessary, or as Jacobs and others describe it, they're a therapeutic or a curative factor in the group. Jacob calls clarity of purpose. The leader and the members are all very clear about the purpose of the group. The single most important therapeutic factor, clarity of purpose. An educational group can't turn into a psychotherapy group midway. A support group can't evolve into a group where one topic and one individual get all the focus. In the same vein, everyone should feel that the group is really relevant to their own needs. This is an issue that the leader is responsible for, making sure it remains relevant and making sure that it adheres to its purpose at the outset. So I've put on the slide the nitty-gritty. By that I mean some other therapeutic forces are things like what room you're all sitting in, what time the group meets, and that sort of thing. So let's talk about some of that, the nitty-gritty. The ideal group size for counseling, support, or therapy groups is 5 to 8 people. 3 to 12 people would be the limits. No less than 3, no more than 12. A psychoeducational group can have about 4 to 15 members. 5 to 8 members is ideal, and it's really ideal for most groups because good interaction and good discussion is really possible with this many people. Everyone can be heard in the hour or 2 hours that the group lasts. How frequently you all meet in a group needs to be a positive force too. It needs to be a therapeutic force. So you don't want to meet so often that the group becomes boring. And not so infrequently that it seems like you're starting over each time or that you are really not getting to know each other. Some of this depends on the type of group and where the group is. Support type meetings can be 2 times a month. Now maybe it's a residential or an inpatient setting, and so you're going to meet 2 or 3 times a week, maybe even every day for a short amount of time. Now the setting. The setting of your group meeting should also support good dynamics. It should be comfortable for discussion. Everyone is visible and in view. No one's blocked or hiding. The seats aren't too far away from each other so that it's not intimate. And then another nitty-gritty item, when? What time of day should you hold it? I think this would really depend on what your group is and who your participants are, but Jacobs says that you need to hold it at a time when people have some energy, so don't hold it too late in the evening, right after work, or when they're hungry, or not right after lunch when they're tired because they've just eaten all of that and it's sort of that midday slump. So a lot of these factors, like I said, are going to depend on the makeup of the group, and the leader can adjust all these factors, potentially, to suit the members' needs. It can be something that's also discussed at the very first meeting when you're arranging what your group wants to accomplish and when and where it should meet. Now that we've covered the nitty-gritty, let's look at some other therapeutic forces. Leader attitude. The leader's attitude is going to be quickly ascertained by the members, and it can certainly have an anti-therapeutic effect on the group. A leader who's too tired or overworked or who dreads the group cannot be an effective leader. A leader who lacks experience in groups or individual counseling, too, will obviously struggle. The attitude that the members have toward the leader is another therapeutic or potentially anti-therapeutic force. When there is respect and trust, that positive attitude is going to encourage more interaction and trust in the group. Now, trust is funny. It ebbs and flows in a group. It can be built up and then slip away after certain comments or certain topics are discussed. And then it can build again. Trust is influenced by a lot of factors. Members who know that they're going to see each other outside the group may have trouble disclosing personal information about themselves when they know that they're going to have to see these people later. Maybe they work with them, or they live with them, or they go to school with them. Another issue surrounding trust is when very touchy topics are brought up, and some members might be really opinionated or loud or hostile or judgmental. For instance, let's say one member's really opinionated about something like extramarital affairs or race or gender or abortion or homosexuality, some of the really sensitive topics. And they're allowed to make inflammatory statements, and the leader doesn't jump in and interject, let's talk about this in a different way, or let's redirect. Now, when this sort of thing happens, other members are not going to feel safe disclosing their feelings about some of these touchy subjects, or maybe any kind of subject, because they feel like the group's not a safe place. The group is a place where there's yelling and inflammatory statements flying around. So, they don't want to disclose too much about their lives for fear of facing a lot of criticism. The final term I wanted to define was group process, the stages that a group goes through. To simplify this topic, the author of the group counseling book states that all groups go through only 3 stages: the beginning, the middle, and the end. Well, your textbook would be a lot shorter if we could just keep it at that. I love this. The beginning, the middle, and the end. When you look through the Capuzzi textbook, you see that there is a lot more commentary on the subject. But there's truth to what Jacobs says about there only being 3 stages that all groups go through. He points out that in most groups where leadership is pretty structured and the leader stays active, the stages of the group are predictable. The beginning, or the initial, the middle, or the working stage, and the end, or the closing, or the terminating. We'll go into the stages in much more detail in another lecture in this course. At this point, it's enough to understand that the beginning stage is a time of everyone getting acquainted and comfortable with each other. It's a time that the counselor, him or herself, does a lot of groundwork to set the stage for things to be successful. Then the middle or the working stage is when the bulk of the therapeutic work gets done. Members start sharing at a much more personal level when you get to the middle of the process. The individuals start doing their work. They start goal setting, completing tasks, and the leader is making sure that the purpose of the group is playing out to the benefit of all the members. The middle stage is also where you'll have a lot of interpersonal conflict too, as the members get used to one another, and the more they get involved in the group, the more interpersonal work is going to happen. Then the final stage, the closing stage, the end, is devoted to ending the group. Members reflect on their experience in the group, in the work they've done outside the group, how they've met or not met their goals, and so what their plans for the future are, and they say goodbye to the people and the experience of the group. As you could imagine, different dynamics are going to come into play based on the type and the focus of the group. In task groups, for example, the leader would be interested in team building and group effectiveness. The counselor would need to do conflict resolution work if the members are unable to get along long enough to achieve their goals. Other problems that the leader might need to address are cliques that form or power plays. In support groups, no one must dominate the group. Everyone must share and feel like there's a safe environment for it to be a good support group, obviously. So trust, commitment, true sharing are vital dynamics to try to establish. The leader has to watch for non-supportive members, members who try to rescue, who try to solve the problem for another member. That's not really going to help them. Lots of advice giving is not going to help. The leader should point out the difference between giving advice and giving support. Poor dynamics in a support group might exist when the members just don't have anything in common. For example, a divorce group where some people are newly divorced and grieving over their divorce, and then others are years past their divorce and focused on very different things in their lives, like dating or raising older children. Finally, members might fear losing their new support system at the termination of the group, and the leader has to help them plan for this time. Now, I don't want to simplify these topics too much, nor do I want to read your textbook to you and outline your textbook for you. So suffice it to say that your readings are going to give you much more discussion and depth about these other topics. This has just been a brief overview of the big field of group counseling. And you'll need to read and read and read, and some of the exercises and the discussion that we will do will really help bring these topics into clarity.